Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and coming to you from the Underworld North Studio in Toronto. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis, down in Underworld, Orange County. Got it, fit that in. How are you doing, Joel?
I am doing good. It is a little chilly up there, but obviously I don't have snow on the beaches. We haven't gotten that bad yet. Global warming hasn't destroyed the world that badly yet.
Yes, we definitely have snow on the beach here in Toronto. It's nice. It was fun. Check out my Instagram for that snow on the beach shot. There we go. Yeah, this week we are diving in, as Captain Janeway says. There's no time like the present. That's why there's no time travel in Star Wars. But storytellers do play with the passage of time, plot, pacing, even distribution schedules have their part. We look at some different ways that the audience experience time in stories from the galaxy far, far away, different stories that play with that time dilation, etc., and different ways that all the stories do, generally speaking. But first, let's get to these plugs. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we've got memberships and super chats, and yeah, of course on Underworld socials, at the SW as well, Underworld Facebook, etc., etc., Twitch and Twitch. Yeah, and we got the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, the link below. Click that, join in, tag us, say hi. Joel is guaranteed. I have my personal guarantee. If you tag Joel in a question, he will respond to you. 100% guaranteed. He doesn't bite. He's very, very friendly in there. Yeah, how are you doing, Joel? Or how's the Discord doing?
It's going great. Last Friday we began our Star Wars marathon watch, and unlike last time when I said we were going to start with Tale of Jedi, we were wrong. We didn't. We actually went further back. We started in the days of the glory days of the High Republic with young Jedi adventures. We made up with those Padawans and their pilot friend, and they had adventures in the High Republic era. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, good point. Dom pointed out that's the earliest actual timeline thing we've seen on screen.
It's low key hilarious. It's like we're actually starting with probably like the most low stakes, lighthearted thing probably in Star Wars. Where it's like, oh no, the only thing is a kid pirate stealing vegetables. Oh no! Before the death and destruction and the chaos.
It's something I will try and show my niece next opportunity I get. We'll see. But yeah, you're gonna get to Tales of the Jedi soon, right? So.
Well, first season's 19 episodes long. We only watched the first 3, so we got some ways to go.
Long, eh? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The good old fashioned almost 20 episode cartoon season, like they used to do back in the olden days.
There you go. So that'll be done by the time the Taika Waititi film comes out, is what we're
pretty much. I mean, I've done the math. We're gonna be in Clone Wars land for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. It's a long show. It's a great show, as we'll talk about later in this episode. Also, you can check out the Tractor Beam Comics reviews every Wednesday night, although Chris Hobb and I did Friday, I believe, because of the holidays. But yeah, every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Comics are for Wednesdays. Wednesdays are for comics. Yeah, Chris Abbott and I start after we sit down. We talk about the comic books that came out this past week. That came out that day. This coming Wednesday, there's only one. It's ongoing number 42, I believe. Although check out the that really great Padme action figure variant. That's pretty sweet. So
I got one more thing to promote too. Which I put in the link in the description below. We have just began. Star Wars Culture has just began our weekly Star Wars slate. So check it out. Link it in the description below. Please watch it. Please share it. Please subscribe. We need your support. So please give it a watch. It's good stuff. Learn about what's going on in the world of Star Wars.
Yeah, good to see Culture Slate getting back up and running with the Star Wars podcast. I guess there have been stuff going on.
We're like Star Wars week news slate, but not podcast.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. A weekly news thing. Yeah, good to know. I mean, and in case anyone's wondering, yes, we were like the Star Wars Underworld network, but we're definitely still in the fandom fam with Culture Slate. Definitely all the graphics, everything. We're still working on them. Working on with the Tractor Beam logo. Working on with some other things down the pipe that we're hopefully trying to finalize and get to you, but let you know all about. But for now, yeah, definitely with Culture Slate for sure, and grateful to everything they've done. Shout out to I'll shout out to him again, Marty Ingleston, doing that great tractor beam intro video. That was fantastic. So great to see. Yeah, the fandom fam keep on going. So yeah, tractor beam Wednesdays. When does the Culture Slate thing drop usually?
Monday, so today.
Okay,
So every Monday, and then we'll have shorts throughout the week, but at least one video a week.
nice. And those aren't necessarily live, right? I guess those are-
Nah, like this one's like only for like 4 minutes. With like
Okay.
there's 5 articles about very Star Wars things.
Yes. And Omar is correct. There we go. Handshaking. There we go. All right. Let's dive into our week in Star Wars. Yeah, Joel, take it away.
Yeah, so I had a lot of things to think about, but I decided to settle on something that I kind of realized about Marcion Rowe when I was just kind of thinking about him recently. Marcion Rowe is like a less competent version of an old school Sith Lord. And when I mean old school Sith Lord, I mean like a pre Darth Bane Sith Lord. Like, he is making all the mistakes that the Sith decide we're not going to do anymore. Like, there's a reason why, at least in Legends, not sure if it's canon, but I'm going to say it is until until I'm proven wrong. Or say it is and proven wrong, like the internet deserves. Like the internet says.
Wait, is this on the internet? This thing on the internet? No, sorry.
I know, but no. There's a reason. Like Darth Bane, at least in the book, was like, every time we do our Sith thing, we get an army. We always get the Jedi something to unite it, and the galaxy to unite against us, and then we always lose, and then we always kill ourselves too. That's why we got to go in the shadows, and so the Jedi don't have anything to unite against. We can do everything secretly, stab in the back.
Yeah.
Marcion Rowe, he's doing the old-fashioned way of like, I'm gonna, make big statements, marshal my evil, chaotic forces, have this weird little empire territory to myself, and like just hate on the Jedi. This is my audible Marcion Rowe voice.
That's
It
how he
is.
sounds. How Mark Thompson makes me.
I know. And unless he is doing the very quiet and subtle part before he screeches about his hatred for the Jedi.
Unhinged. Is what you're saying.
Unhinged. But yeah, he is. I mean, and obviously, ultimately, the thing that makes him very much like the Sith at the end of the day is his hatred for the Jedi. It's the one thing Sith and him have in common: sheer, pure hatred for the Jedi, which I don't necessarily think is necessarily the mark of a Darksider who's a Sith Lord, but it's certainly what separates most Darksiders from Sith Lords, with the exception maybe like Kylo Ren and Snoke, but they're kind of adjacent Sith anyway, so I don't know if they really count. But my point is, yeah, Marcion Rowe is like, he's doing all the things that the pre-Darth Bane Sith used to do, and they're the reason why they gave up on that and are doing the more in the shadow thing and the kind of the having double lives kind of thing instead of being all up front and in your face about it. And I just find that really interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think about Balin, for example, and how he doesn't hate the Jedi. He just wants to do something else and move beyond it. He loves the ideal of it, but realizes the ideals are never, for him, the ideals are never worth it seems. Whereas, yeah, maybe that's part of what makes a Sith, or what makes, well, Rakine's not a Sith, but if you have force powers, it's what makes a Sith, is partly just this part of this plan to bring down the Jedi. Yeah, that's fascinating. Also really makes me, the more that I think about Gira and what she's trying to do and bring out this organization among the Nile and actually make them not something, not trying to be about killing what they hate, but coming together. And I don't know about saving what you love is far enough for her, but I wouldn't go that
power.
far, I should say. But yeah, but it is about unifying and organizing and actually being legitimate, kind of the way the Republic would recognize legitimacy. So it would make them more formidable. And that's the concern, and that's what, again, we're pretty sure how. No, we're not pretty sure. I wonder. It's a question. Is Gira the downfall of the Nile, or is Markian the downfall of the Nile, or
maybe
some
they're
combination? Both. Yeah, maybe both. Some combination, and yeah, how
I,
what happens. Yeah, it makes for a fascinating story for sure.
I mean, I think the question is, I think it's something that, especially in fandom, most this is a fandom thing more than it is, I
Yeah,
think, the actual story. But it is. But I mean, sometimes the story plays into it as well. It's sort of like it's the old can of leopard change its spots. Is there such a thing as a respectable Sith Lord? Much as
right,
they're like, is there a respectable galactic empire? I mean, Legends used to think so, and that's why I
right,
don't really get problems with Legends. Like, is there such a thing as truly a respectable fascist dictatorship?
right.
The short answer, in my opinion, is no. So,
Well, we're
is
not
there
supposed to think that, no. But
exactly? But is there can there truly be a respectable Nile? It's like I believe in chaos and anarchy, but I have a nice suit and I have business cards.
well, I mean that also gets to the question. You know, the Nile. So I just watched Corey Zadab that video you sent me
Oh,
about
nice.
the Confederacy and thinking about Mina Bonteri and everything she was up to and she was on about. You know, is there something to be said for a resistance against the Coruscant government? This is an episode we're going to do in a few weeks, hopefully soon. Is there something to be said for resistance against the Coruscant government that is about defending the well-being of the Outer Rim and making for a more equal, fair galaxy? Obviously there is something to be said about that. It's just that we don't see it often enough. The only time we see it is the original trilogy, which is I guess yeah, no, not even the sequel trilogy. Sequel trilogy, I mean, the First Order isn't a Coruscant-based government. It's an external invading force that sets itself up as I mean, Snoke's boudoir or whatever, but they don't really have a capital, whatever. Yeah, wherever the supreme leader is, but
I think
yeah,
it's sort of
interesting.
like it's the ideology. I mean, I don't want to make it about what's going to be a future topic, but like
Yeah,
it's the ideology versus the people running it, right? Like, of
yeah,
course, there's a good thing to have an equal
yeah,
galaxy, but it's like I'm going to bring equality. I'm going to hire all the mega corporations who
yeah,
think we should deregulate and have just weird anarch-capitalist society with
yeah.
battle droids and a guy called General Grievous who cackles be our supreme commander. He seems like a good dude.
Seems dependable. Seems
Yes.
dependable. Yeah. So yeah, fair enough. The other
But,
thing I'm gonna say,
oh,
Count Dooku's exquisite pajamas. Those are exquisite. It's
right.
in Battlefront 2.
But one more
Check it
thing
out.
I'll just bring up that's High Republic related,
Yeah.
and ties into this. This is why I'm curious about the Acolyte, especially if it is Sith related, because it's sort of like are the Sith looking at Marcion Rowe and going, "Dude, we tried this 1,000 years ago. The reason we gave this up, and they're doing something else now." It's like,
Yeah.
are they looking at Marcion Rowe and going, "Oh, he's a goner." It's like this is stupid. Like they're looking at him and thinking he's stupid. It's like we're just gonna lay back, do our Sith thing because we got the right way.
Or at
Um,
least what he did do, because I'm fairly sure he's done by the end of phase 3.
Oh yeah, totally. But
Yeah. But
but you know what I mean. Like there's
like well,
prob
well hopefully, yeah. Hopefully Leslie Hilton's gonna name drop him and say, yeah, this marketing guy, he was again unhinged and he didn't do it right. Let's got this Tenebrous guy and this Plagueis guy and this Palpatine guy, Sidious guy.
well, I don't know if any of
Maybe
them are around, but you know what we. But yeah,
no, but you know what I mean. Yeah,
right,
I get what you're saying, and that the Bane plan seems
right.
sensible. Seems like it turned out. Seems like it worked out. Bane plan worked out. Marking
Yeah.
scheme. By worked out, I mean the end.
Hmm.
But all that stuff. So yeah, speaking of nothing, but I'll just say go into unless you had any more to say about that.
No, I'm good. That's just my thoughts on Marcion Road.
Yeah,
Just interesting.
this guy, compelling
Okay.
character.
Mhm.
Glad to keep him in the name, even even when phase 3 is over and this thing is hopefully still going. This podcast, we're gonna keep this logo because he's such a great character. Why not? All right, yeah. So my week in Star Wars, I just started Galaxy's Edge Black Spire by Delilah Dawson, and yeah, just partly, it's kind of funny. It's meant to be an ad a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of the vibes of it being an ad for Galaxy's Edge to go to the park and eat the things and drink the things and see the things and buy the things and buy the things and buy the things.
Mhm.
But really, I mean, I'm reading it because I've already been there and seen the things and bought the things and just good to remember to be a part of that world. Of course, taking Vimarati's story and continuing her story from Phasma, and really connecting it, I think, more with yeah, more directly. Oh, maybe not. I mean, the Phasma story somewhat connects with the whole First Order resistance thing, but this I feel like is going to more deeply. But it's also, yeah, it's just this funny, weird thing of saying, okay, where was that? What did that look like? Where I touched that building? What happened there? I tasted that food. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Also, yeah, this is definitely very going back to Batu because we're getting the Thrawn Alliance's comic very soon. So looking forward to again going back to Batu at a different time and seeing it in comics. Of course, I don't know if I'll be able to go back for real in 2024. So never know. Maybe 2025. We'll see what happens. So there's that. But yeah, just saying I've started that diving in. I'm not going to do Rise of the Red Blade instead. I'll be doing this one instead, and then I'll when is it Skip from Ballo? No, not a Skip from Ballo. The YA High Republic with Alyssa Wong and Daniel Jose Older when that comes out at the end of the month. I'll switch to that. But yeah, that's my reading list coming up. One more thing.
That's such a good book, by the way. I just want to say that's just such a good book. I remember reading that. It's like, oh yeah, this is good, and it is. I'm curious. I know you're so early on into it, and I kind of forget some of the earlier stuff. But it's like I always remember the books, and especially just the supplementary material or the paratext, as new friends on Twitter, Daughter the Ferrex podcast mentioned. That's what they call it. I don't know what that really means, but it's such an interesting term. Well, if we ever have them on, we'll have to ask them. But I just remember, I said to them when I was talking about this stuff, is like, the conflicts in Star Wars are always a lot more interestingly portrayed in the other material compared to the original trilogies, not the original trilogy, just the original films that they portrayed in. That's what you hear about the prequel with the Clone Wars. And I agree with the sequel stuff. It's like, yeah, I think the books and the few shows and even the Poe Dameron comic kind of portray the First Order resistance conflict. Still don't like that name. A lot more interestingly than the movies do in terms of just being more. It's not just Empire versus Rebels again. I think the books go and make it a lot more unique than that. And I was curious, just one of the first few chapters. I don't know how far you're in, but just the chapters you in, have you noticed like a more different perspective on that beyond what the movies gave you originally?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good question. First of all, I'll say that it tracks. I mean, the thing I always say is that books and comics, you just have more time to go into
TV shows too.
And TV shows, you have more time to go into the complexity of it. More time to delve through the intricacies. A more committed fan base is more patient and more willing to track with it. So that's part of it. Yeah, it's interesting with Batu. It's this outer rim neutral planet, and that's unique because that's unique to this conflict because it's resistance and it's First Order, and there's this race to get there, race to establish these things. They're almost a bit more neutral. I mean, at this point, they're not, right? This is after the Last Jedi. The resistance is being decimated, but there isn't a central government on Coruscant anymore, right? That's kind of that changes everything, right? If it was Batu, if this was during the Republic, maybe. I mean, the Republic didn't reach that far, but maybe they'd be like, let's bring the rule of law and order. If during the High Republic, especially when we do see it during the High Republic, it's still on its own thing. If it's during the Empire, let's bring order to this chaos that is not the Empire. But this case, it's different. You have Vimarati. Hopefully, can go either way. It can go either way, and that this town and the loyalties of the people, even a crime lord like Oga, which is another interesting thing. I didn't realize Oga was this crime boss. I thought she just ran a bar, but nope. Owns the town, and so I haven't gotten into too much detail. I've only at the part where she shoots her Wookiee boyfriend for cheating on her, but at the very beginning, just a good character setup. I'll give it that. But Yeah, it definitely it has a different feel. It has a different I don't know. Yeah, it does. I mean, part of the feel is okay. Leia sends Vi to on this mission with Archex, and it's receiving in a way that's it's what the sequel trilogy was supposedly hoping to do was what's the legacy of these big three characters. It did it, I think, with Rey especially. What's the legacy of the Jedi? What's the legacy of what Luke was able to achieve?
Mhm.
And this, it's Leia passing on what she's learned, and she's needed elsewhere. She's needed on uh, where she has to go try and find her son, but in this, and then so she has to send Vi out, and then the whole Hosnian cataclysm happens. But Leia can't be everywhere, and she can't be the hero anymore. She can't be the main character of this. Vi has to be the main character because Vi is now in her prime as a spy and physically. So yeah, it definitely has a different feel there, and I'm already starting to gather that. So
Yeah. Once I don't want to take. Sorry, I just had last thoughts.
mm,
One of the things
yeah.
I've always thought about in terms of one of the bigger differences, which we don't see in the movie, but I've always sort of believed this to be the case from stuff from the novelizations and probably maybe what the other books and stuff were going for
Mhm.
is yeah, the First Order blows up the central government, but I've always sort of believed the First Order's hold of the galaxy is so tenuous.
Mm,
There's a line in the Rise of Skywalker novelization where Tucker
yeah.
goes, "It's like he calls it like I always forget the phrase, but like fire the rebellion all over the galaxy." And the idea is always the New Republic, not the New Republic, the First Order always takes over the key systems, but not everywhere. So it's like they get
Mm,
Coruscant, Corellia, like all the important places, like kind of the places
yeah.
got the chokeholds of the galaxy. But and this is something another video which I sent you. I don't know if you watched it. Where they talk about how there's the people fleet that we see in Tross, and we're going to see in the Duel of Fate script.
Mhm.
That's because of the New Republic weirdly creating local armies for the sector governments and sort of allowing people to kind of have like private, or I don't want to say private armies. I'm sure there's some regulation
I
to that,
mean,
but like
like the Republic Defense Coalition in
yeah, kind of
the
a
Republic.
weird hybrid system of a central fleet. Like this fleet that they destroy is probably the most organized, it's the central one.
Yeah.
But there's also the other regional fleets, and I've always sort of suspected
Mhm.
that the First Order had the important chokeholds, but the regional fleets in places kind of were keeping the First Order from taking over everywhere. And
Yeah.
then once Exegol, you
Oh,
kind of get
right.
your Republic Defense Coalition saying everyone gets together. It's like, okay, I got to take down Palpatine one more time. Here we
Yeah.
go.
And I was always a little confused by that because
Mhm,
my impression at the end of The Last Jedi,
mhm,
Rey saying to Luke, the First
mhm,
Order will control all the major star systems.
mhm.
My impression was that they were about to take over, and that Kylo Ren becoming Supreme Leader is, Skywalker is now in charge of the galaxy, and I think he's the Emperor now.
Mhm.
Kind of completed what Vader and Luke weren't able to do, or too weak to do. But I guess there's different ways to work that through. Yeah, you're right. Like
You should read the
I
Last Jedi
I
novelization. There's
did,
a
yeah.
very
I
interesting
don't quite
thing
remember
about
that part.
those local militias.
I read the last. Oh, you mean the Rise of Skywalker one?
No, Last Jedi.
Okay, because I read the Last Jedi one. I don't quite remember that part.
If I find my book, I'll send you some pictures later.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. I mean,
But yeah,
I borrowed it from the library. One
great book.
last little thing I want to say is, um, this is a whole other topic probably. This is also very Joel like Weekend Star Wars thought. So I've been thinking a little more about um plot twists and predictability, and I've said this a few times when it comes to Ahsoka that you know we tend to since the Game of Thrones thing, right? We tend to
Mhm.
say, and probably before that, say, "Oh, I couldn't predict this. Oh, this was exciting. I didn't predict this. What a big plot twist!" And yet, that Ahsoka episode 5, Shadow Warrior, that's the name of the episode. We knew exactly that was coming. Right? We knew exactly that. So even with like I knew I stay away from any and all spoilers. I even stopped watching trailers with a few weeks to go. All that. I could tell you, yeah, in all likelihood, Ahsoka is going to have to confront Anakin in her past. I mean, we knew Anakin was going to show up, Hayden was going to show up, but that specifically, Ahsoka was going to confront her sense of guilt and regret about her what she felt was her role in letting Anakin fall to the dark side and becoming Darth Vader and everything that Vader ends up doing with that, right? All the tyranny that he ends up wreaking across the galaxy, or whatever there was, wrought. But it was still, here's the thing, it was still incredibly satisfying. It wasn't shocking or surprising. It was still exciting to see it. It was still incredibly satisfying, and it was rewarding those of us who, and this is why, because it was rewarding those of us who have thought about these things and who know what Dave Filoni thinks about and cares about what Dave Filoni cares about too, and was able to see it and present it. And I mean, I talk about prequelism being being defunct and not necessary anymore. I think 10, 20 years ago, they might have just ignored all that. They might have just, I mean, there wouldn't have been an Ahsoka show at all, but they would have just said, okay, these random things that happened, but the real main story is whatever happens with Luke and Han and Leia. It goes to show just how far we've come, that we actually got to see that moment in live action, and that we predicted it and we wanted it, but it was still satisfying just because it's predictable. That's my point. So yeah, Dom has started to do a playthrough of Jedi Survivor.
Nice.
He's already predicted in the first hour that Bode is going to betray them. He
Spoilers.
I'm pretty sure he's predicted that Cal and Marin are going to suck face. But it's a whole other tangent that I'm curious about. But I want to say, we'll say that for another time. But I mean, just because it's predictable doesn't mean it's bad. People use this as it's so predictable. Well, how do they get there? How do they do the thing we've predicted? How do they present it? How do they execute it? That's the main thing. You and Joel, you and Dom are exactly the opposite of me when it comes to spoilers. Like completely, like don't care. I don't know if you don't care, but Dom definitely doesn't care. It's just funny. And so how does this thing we know is going to happen? How do they get there? And still being able to connect emotionally to it. I mean, that's the thing for me is when I know a spoiler is happening, even if I can predict it, sometimes it means I don't connect as emotionally to it because I like to be taken for the twists and turns. But even if I can tell, take me on a ride, take me on a journey. Yeah, so that's the thing. Predictability unpredictability isn't what it is chalked up to be, is kind of my point there.
I mean, I'll just say this, and I can make this for another day.
Yeah.
I have this whole rant I could go on about why I blame Game of Thrones for just so much bad discourse about predictability and death.
Yeah,
I blame Game of Thrones so much for the discourse around killing off characters.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even funny. But
you're not alone with that. You're not with that.
Okay, like, hey, I mean, it's not about what happens. It's like, how was it executed?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, the good guys won. Oh my god, I didn't predict that. I mean, unless it's Revenge of the Sith, but
Right.
How many of those do we have?
And Revenge of the Sith, we knew what was going to happen. It's just how does he get there?
Exactly. But good points. Good points.
Yeah. What were the joke you were making about? About how I guess I have darkness ends, or how something ends. And Palpatine X Order 66 and all that.
I mean, I know. I think we were joking about
Dark
spoilers, and I was like, Palpatine lives. No, Palpatine. Yeah, he lives because he's gonna still live you when he gets chucked over. So yeah.
No, it was Dark Droids, and you're like, at the end of Dark Droids, Vader chucks Palpatine over the ledge.
Something like that. Yeah, but it's like it's the journey, not the destination for me.
Exactly. And in fact, I mean, that's another thing. We've all seen these films hundreds, if not thousands of times. I mean, that's the genius of these films, is that they take us for a ride every single time, right? And it's I mean, I watched Last Jedi in the theaters how many times, and every single time, except for that one time where I was under caffeinated and just too tired. But every other time, I was completely engaged in there because it just takes me for a journey. It takes the characters for a journey, and that's why I
Right.
find it a perfect film. But
And
yeah.
there's a difference between predictability and then maybe kind of equivalent of like, I don't know, lazy predictability.
Yeah.
And like, I love Rise of Skywalker. I think you probably in some way could put that more in like the lazy predictability, even though it's a fun ride. It's like,
Mhm.
all right, Palpatine was the answer, and I think the problem more with that is you set up a mystery, and then it's like, oh well, that was the easy answer. It was
Yeah.
Palpatine, of course it was.
The night thing,
But that's more like you set up a movie to be a mystery setup movie, and then it's like, oh well, that's the answer.
Yeah.
Compared to like, you know, just having Palpatine just show up at the beginning. It's like maybe people would still moan with like, okay, they'll just accept it and take it for a ride. It's like, what's the ride?
Somehow.
That's a big difference between
Mhm.
kind of predictability in the kind
Yeah.
of grand sense, and then yeah, kind of underwhelmingness.
Somehow Palpatine survived. Somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
I need
But
to watch that one again. I need to give that another shot.
have you only watched it once?
Yeah. No, of course not. I need to
Okay.
watch it more times.
Read the
Recently.
novelization at least.
Yeah, I should. I have the novelization. I should do that. Fun
Um,
times.
but yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into the main topic. And before I turn it over to Joel, I'll set this up. Yeah, we're talking about timelines and time and how we experience time in Star Wars and pacing and all that stuff I said at the beginning. Where this came up and be talking about this on Iron Cannon and Tractor Beam ad nauseum. You know, all the comics between Empire Strikes Back and Dark Droids. Empire Strikes Back, or it's Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but Dark Droids, and now Schism Imperial and Lando on trial. Um, and all the crossovers, right? War of the Bounty Hunters, etc. Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi is supposed to be 6 months. These comics have been from 2020 to 2024. Now, I mean, they're coming to an end, hopefully. But and I say hopefully only because it's been 4 years, and because the stories themselves are starting to lag. It's like, okay, we get another thing and another thing. Dark Droid started off so great, and then it kind of petered out. Schism Imperial and Lando's Trial are starting off great. Hopefully Wednesday we'll get that first issue.
Isn't the next issue the Sith one and then Lando's trial?
Oh yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah. There's the one with the holocron there, or not the holocron, the kyber crystal. That's true. And then I mean, I think there's going to be kind of like a one-off, one shot, and whatnot. But anyway, so like the ongoing run after Dark Droids. The thing I said on Friday on Tractor Beam was if we enjoy the story, we're fine with it. But give us a good story. It's still starting to lag. It's still starting to be. It's just weird, right? That it's partly because this monthly comic release schedule and the way the Marvel pipeline. Something weird must have happened with the distribution. Who knows? I mean, maybe it was the changeover from Diamond to. I guess it's Penguin distributing for Marvel now. All that stuff, it brings up this question: how do we experience time? For folks who are going to read the trades, read the collected editions, and the omnibus, that's going to be a different experience, and that's going to be probably a lot tighter experience. But I mean, who knows? I don't know what what Charles Soule's writing process is, how he experienced this time. That's another question I might ask him. So it just sets up this thing of two things. There's two aspects to this. There's actual just the standard run-of-the-mill pacing in a story, because that's like every time you sit down and read a book of fiction or thing, you're experiencing the author and the artist or whoever is telling you the flow of time, is giving you a flow of time, and it's almost never linear. The only time it's ever been linear is something like 24, but even that wasn't. It was week to week, right? Here, a comic book is month to month. A novel is whenever you happen to sit down and read it, and our brains have a way of, I think, of playing with it. of understanding that. It's just, yeah, so there's the actual in story pacing of it and the out of story, out of universe, both the distribution of it, like, and that's the thing with High Republic, for example. We'll get into different examples, but also just when we choose to sit down and read things and the way we sit down and read things. Again, the big example in the real world is this difference between single issues and collected editions and the omnibus and whatnot when it comes to comics. So yeah, that's kind of where all this comes from. But Joel, you've done a bunch of prep here to go into different examples and whatnot. So I'll you take it away.
Yeah, but I'll just build off of what you said first before I do
Sure.
that, and I'll just say, yeah, there are certainly in the history of comics just certain writers who just do read better in trade than they do week to
Mhm.
week. That's just how it is sometimes. I mean, I quite enjoyed reading the Vader comic in the first week in trade than I probably would have if I'd done week to week.
Mhm.
I had much more fun with Dylan when I did his week to week, but I have it all in trade now, so I don't even remember what it was like reading week to week.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of Star Wars Legends comics I have. I got omnibuses for, so I have
Yeah.
no idea what it was like reading week to week for those because I've only read them in omnibuses.
Mhm.
With Tales of the Jedi, Dark Empire. Dark Empire's not an omnibus; it's just the original issue. Um,
Sure.
so yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I do sometimes wonder with some of the stuff even I've read in the past, what it was like to read Dark Empire week to week compared to
Mhm.
getting the whole story. But so yeah, that's just something there. But one thing we've been talking about a lot is obviously the comics, especially now, have this like year 6 months, the year to 6 months time gap
Mhm.
between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and they've been going on for 4 years now. But the thing is, every arc, an X amount of time really does pass,
Mhm.
right? Like you can have a 6-issue arc. That's a lot of issues. At any universe, probably adventure that only took a day,
Yeah.
a 1 day thing. Um, so you just spend how many months would be that? Be 6 months? Like 6 months? I
Yeah.
don't know, on a story that's only a day long. Um, and that's just comic books for you. You got these massive honking books sometimes. I can't think of some example at the top. And like they're only a day long, maybe two, like 2 days, but it's like 400 pages worth of a story. Um, and I think that plays tricks on us, especially when we're all about timelines. It's like, how much are they going to cram in here? Or like, how many Luke adventures can there truly be? And when you maybe actually stop down to think, it's like, actually, there could be quite a lot. Um, you know, uh, like I put, you put it in here, High Republic. High Republic's been going on about the amount of time of the comics, although they've like some High Republic. I don't know how like the big adult novels, they seem to be spread across a couple days.
Yeah.
As I Have Darkness truly was probably a couple days, maybe a few weeks. I there wasn't any indication of time. You knew some time was passing, but again, you knew some time was passing, but they never said a week passed, a day passed. It's like you get a sense time is passing. It's not years because then people that would probably be a difference, but it's not days either. So there's that, and it kind of I think it just plays tricks on you, and I think a lot of that will probably have to do with how you write a character in some cases, right? So it's like if you say years is passing in this book for like Eye of Darkness, the name of our Chris should be really different than compared to like, oh, she's only been dealing with this for like a couple of months or maybe a couple
Mhm.
of weeks. Like she's in the inclusion jail for years. She should be way more withered and like maybe like like
Yeah.
compared to like a few months. It's like not
Mhm.
good, but could stand it. Whether that's
I mean, to jump into that, I mean that raises a whole other thing about time jump, right? I mean,
right.
and that they did a great job with, and George Mann did a fantastic job with of saying, okay, this year in between from the fall of Starlight Beacon, her year in the occlusion zone, it has weathered her, it has changed her,
Right.
and so that's a good example. I mean, another odd sort of example. I mean, I talked about Thrawn alliances and how it goes in between two different time frames and plays with that. There's lots of stories like that. My mind went to Avengers Endgame, right? The 5-year blip, right? Which is similar to the High Republic thing, but yeah, our sense of time there. So interesting. Another interesting example I wanted to bring up. There's between the ongoing comic, uh, the Kieran Gillen ongoing comic 2020, and the 2017, no 2015, whenever it is, and the Charles Soule 2017 comic, the whole Moncala thing. That I found was a crossover 20 years apart. So that was another just weird example. But like we get a sense of these things. What is interesting, what I'm realizing now, thinking about it now, actually, is our brains actually do have this amazing ability to organize and understand this, right? We understand the passage of time and how that factors into, again, the Ever Chris example, how that factors into what where the character is at and where the character has changed, and makes that believable. It makes that transition believable.
I
Think about a year in the seclusion zone undercover. Yeah. So
I think what's interesting though is that we don't have a lot of examples. Well, actually, no, we do. But I'm talking about like time in the story itself. So
yeah.
like you got the like. Well, use sort of like the prequel example where it's like 3 years passing between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Rogue One, Scene One starts at the place, and then in the movie we have 15, 16-year time jump because Jin's a full grown woman now. So it's sort of like it'd be like if you read Eye of Darkness, chapter 2, chapter 3, 10 years later. Like, oh dang, like that's in the actual novel itself.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's the thing about High Republic is we kind of, those of us who are in it really have a sense of how things stretch out. I mean, and also you have Shadow of Starlight in the number 1, I think, or number 2, and then you have I have Darkness. So putting those together, yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think of stories that have big time jumps in.
Oh, I got a couple of examples. I mean, Rise of the Red Blade that takes place over the course of several years. That's the whole Clone Wars is. Deal with the whole Clone Wars. There's that. Legends example, Plagueis. Plagueis is like got Palpatine 8. Got Palpatine 18, and then you got him by the time of Phantom Menace. So a couple decades pass there. Just thinking of canon example. Canon books, they don't have that extensive time jumps, really. No, Catalyst is just the Clone Wars and maybe like a couple years into the Empire, but nothing drastic. Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Catalyst is a little bit, I guess. I mean, one thing I'll also say is that I have an example here of the Vader comic, Charles Soule's Vader comic. Well, this is maybe an example of time accelerating. It seems like it feels this way. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but well, no, I guess that's the point. Is it's a feeling, it's an impression. Arcs 1 to 4, issues 1 to 18, they take place over 5 years. That's Vader's emergence from Anakin. But then that final arc, issues I guess 19 to 25, they take place over 2 years. It feels longer, and the way they do that is all the different. I mean, it's a good time strategy of saying, okay, build this prototype of the castle, tear it down, doesn't work. Build this prototype of the castle, tear it down, doesn't work.
Well, construction just takes a very fast in Star Wars, but yeah,
Vader moment taking over these things. That's another thing. I mean, Charles Soule does a lot. I've mentioned 8 Billion Genies a few times. That one definitely plays with time and has this logarithmic thing of first 8 hours, first 8 days, first 8 weeks, ends up being like the first 8 centuries after this event that happens. And so,
but there's the interesting thing, though.
Yeah.
The Charles Soule run takes place. Vader's like what? First 5 years is Vader, right?
Yeah.
But the arcs themselves, like how long was Vader on Mon Cala for? Like a day, maybe a week at most. You could theoretically then have someone else decide, hey, I want to do Vader the early years, and still have plenty of Darth Vader early adventures.
Yeah,
because
there's a little bit in there. That's true.
Like what? Just have Darth Vader on a planet for a day. 6 issues. There you go.
That's a good point. In that, from the first 4 arcs, they're kind of these isolated things, and they connect to each other. That last arc is this one stretched out story, but it feels like the Rocky montage, the training montage, right?
But yeah, you
um,
got to do something in between
but
that. So,
also, I was surprised. It was only 25 issues in a year and a half.
so think.
Because
Um,
I mean, that's another thing. Every 3 weeks is supposed to every 4 weeks or 5 weeks. So yeah,
Right, and I was on the Discord, not our Discord, other people's Discord, just kind of looking
mhm,
around, seeing what people say. And they were mentioning, we were talking about this as well with the time thing.
mhm,
It's like how much time passes in between arcs for some like the Empire to not Empire, A New Hope to Empire years. Like you could
yeah,
probably I hope they don't because they're like seems like giving up on ideas. But if you ever want to tell more Lucan and Leia stories in between that time, there
yeah,
probably is still room to fill. I, right? Like Hope Dies
yeah.
takes over what a course of a couple hours.
Probably something like that. Yeah,
So it's
and
like
that's the thing. We don't know. We're not given anything. We just have these impressions, and it is. And comics. I guess we're picking on comics because it's just this weird tradition of the monthly distribution schedule, right? Of comic comes out every month, uh, but you can play with the time and the pacing in it. Yeah, that's true. We don't quite know, but I guess the idea is you release enough story to feel like it's filling out that time, and that's why this whole 2020 to 2024 thing is so weird. It feels strange, is because there's just been so much story and it's been so compact and organized in these crossover events that we don't quite know. It's hard to get a sense of feel of what's happening. Also, we kind of had in our brains 2023 Return of the Jedi at 40. We have Return of the Jedi comics. These kind of just these lead up to Return of the Jedi comics, um, that are not quite in line with or not quite part of the main run because we just don't know. They're just not as connected. Although I think there have been uh, some kind of contact points, but yeah, it's just the question: when are they getting to Return of the Jedi? Where are they building the character? The Vader, you know, that Vader is. And this is what Chris and I talk about a lot. Is Vader is either incredibly chastened by Palpatine, in or he's incredibly chastened by Palpatine and very subservient, or he's about to take over and basically, in a way, do what he does, but he doesn't know that he's about to overthrow Palpatine for good reasons. Is that because of either of those because of Schism Imperial, and is that finally setting him up to do this
or maybe not. It might not be for all
well,
we know.
maybe not, and that'd be weird if we're going to keep going. And you say a lot in the comments. If it sells, then fine. But another thing, we just don't have any announcements or anything either. So
Well, that's
it's
true.
just I'm kind of airing my what's happening still. I mean, that's what again Chris and I are all, what's happening, what's going on. We have no idea. We're just speculating wildly. Give us a good story. This Lando thing, this Lando trial, Luke and the Kyber Crystal, Greg Pak, the Schism Imperial. Give us a good story.
Let me ask you this because we're talking about the comic, but I guess it's kind
Yeah,
of where it all stems from anyway.
yeah.
Look, uh, is it just the Vader comic that's really the biggest problem? I mean, I haven't really gotten into the other ones that hard because I kind of like to focus on the Vader with a
Mhm.
secret hope that may return to Exegol. But I'm just kind of thinking about the other ones, and I'm like, is Vader the only one that's really having this big problem? I feel like I'm enjoying, like, even just by proxy, I feel like other and basically other
Yeah,
people I'm
I
noticing
don't
are enjoying the
know.
other ones more. And Vader always seems to be the weak link to a lot of
I
people.
don't think so. So I think it. So the stuff with Sabe seemed a little bit drawn out, I will say. But then you think, okay, Sabe, she looks like Padme. She's part of this. She gets a crack in the eye in the mask, which is just symbolic of the crack in Vader for getting Anakin. She reminds Vader of Padme, and so that's leading to Return of the Jedi there. I don't think the Vader comic is necessarily the problem as much as, um, I mean, with Dark Droids, it was, what are we doing? Why aren't we done? Why aren't we, everything there does, and I mean everything before with the Ascendant and the Spark Eternal, and that's an Afra, but, um, everything with Kira, how does she play into the wider story, the rebellion and the Empire? That I don't know if that was a problem necessarily because it just carved out a separate story that is special to the comics, but it still raises a question, right? Why are we getting this now? What is the point of this? And maybe that's this the whole maybe our problem in part is to say, oh, it has to tie in, it has to connect to Return of the Jedi. I just think if you're gonna have Luke and Vader, that has to connect to Return of the Jedi. I do think so, especially something like I saw the cover for the free comic book day coming out in May, and that's Luke and Vader on the cover. And I think that's giving us an indication something's coming to a head there. No, I don't think Vader's the problem at all. Frankly, I think
Could
that
definitely be the
one.
one people don't like the most. At least that I've been keeping seeing.
I mean, I didn't mind it. I liked it. I've liked it. It's just, I mean, the whole thing with him and the Scourge was kind of odd and weird, and they didn't really do much with it. They are now, and that's the interesting thing is with Schism Imperial, they are now. I think it is like part of what I'm getting at with all this is it's been 4 years. We want to see. I mean, we want to see these comics serve the film. We want to see these comics bring Vader to the beginning of where he's at in Return of the Jedi. That's cool. What its purpose of these paper bridges are about, right?
Well, are they though? That's the
well, no,
question.
not necessarily, but and that's what I was saying before is they don't have to be.
Mhm.
I just think when we lose that completely, then we kind of wonder, why is it in this time period, one time frame? So to say maybe the big problem, if you will, was where Dark Droids ended up because it kind of petered out and it felt compressed and rushed. And this is what I was saying a few weeks ago on Tractor Beam. It it would have been better at a different time period, moving there with the time to explore the themes and the issues of uh, droid sentience and of a droid uprising. Maybe after Exile, not after Exile. Maybe
I
after
would put it
maybe
that's the goal. That might be,
maybe after after Jakku.
or that too. I mean, yeah.
This new threat the New Republic has to deal with, or something. Do it then, and have a little bit sort of like they did with the Han Solo comic, where Ajax Sigma comes from. Originally, first time we really see him, and that was the purpose of the Han Solo comic, was to give us Ajax Sigma by Mark Guggenheim. To say, okay, here's an aspect of something that Vader can then use as part of his confrontation with Palpatine. But with the Scourge being the Spark Eternal and the Formatic Age and everything going on there. Oh, the Spark Eternal, and this ancient droid intelligence. But then also just a way for Vader to be able to control these droids is what I'm getting at. Then to say later, okay, we'll pick this up, the wider implications of this later. We don't have to have Vader in it at all. So yeah, it was just an odd thing. Again, the whole reason we're talking about this right now is we have a sense of maybe impatience about, and maybe rightly so, maybe wrongly. Where is this going? Maybe that's the real thing about our feeling of time. And time in a story is it moving? Is it moving forward in a coherent way? That's our pace, our sense of pacing, our sense of flow. Is it moving in a certain way? And with Star Wars, it's very weird because we know where, especially in this time frame, we know where that ending has to end up, right? Where it is. I mean, that's the thing why, say, Rebels worked so well. Here's a great example. Rebels worked so well because, we felt these 4 years, and it ends 6 months before A New Hope, but we can see these things seeded in of starting with with the Lothal cell, and then they end up joining the wider rebellion. The rebellion ends up growing and becoming a rebellion together, such that we feel it. We feel that passage of time, and that 6 months
Well,
later,
actually, what's funny about Rebels
you
is
know,
people complained a lot about the same things. They didn't think Rebels was serving the films.
that's how I
Uh,
experienced it. Yeah, well,
uh,
because they didn't have the patience to go a whole season and say, okay,
but
this
what's
is
actually
the
interesting
story.
about Rebels is
Mm,
that, in my opinion, Rebels.
hmm.
Well, I don't say Rebels doesn't serve the film, but I don't think Rebels was interested in serving the film because at the end of the day, the Lothal rebels, they kind of ditched the main rebellion and they just decided to focus
Sure.
on Lothal at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So it is so it's sort of like,
not the films. Sorry, I don't mean serving the films. Maybe I'm talking about it being. Man, this is the problem with Star Wars. It's the problem with the franchise.
or
It
maybe it's a
being
problem with
its own
fandom.
problem with fandom.
What's the problem?
But maybe I'm saying maybe it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
I,
This album's not on there. You know, it's this problem of okay with Rebels. You know, if we're gonna have Leia there, if we're gonna have Mon Mothma there, if we're gonna have X-wings come in eventually, right?
Mhm.
Right. Well, this is how they do it, right? This is how they do it. To say we have this sense of time in Star Wars already, and we have the sense of what the larger story is already. Um, how does this connect? Where does this relate? Where can we connect our feeling of this single story? Maybe this is a way to talk about relating a particular story to the wider story. Where is our sense of the flow and pace of this particular story in relationship to the wider story? So here's another good example. Resistance
Mhm.
doesn't have to connect, doesn't have to have much to do with the rest of the thing.
It
We
kind of
kind of
doesn't,
have
sadly.
guide points along the way. Yeah, maybe we would have liked it if it did. Or you loved that. You like that show, but you
Oh, I
haven't.
love it. Yeah,
It
great.
would have been. You would have liked the fact that it had if it had. But words are tough. What am I saying?
I wish I got a third season.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
But we still have a sense of these characters moving through the story as those characters, and so it's
Here's a weird. I guess maybe here's something maybe to better
yeah.
articulate what I think people were talking about when they talked about Rebels.
Mhm.
I think they thought early on Rebels was Rogue One, and Rebels wasn't Rogue One. And what I mean by Rebels
Yeah.
was Rogue One is I think people got in their heads. I don't blame them because a lot of those early seasons kind of get that vibe too. If you ever talk to Dominic has kind of the big. I think it's Dominic. I think Dominic or Chris, one of them. It had kind of like the conspiracy of Rebels was going to be Rogue One until Rogue One happened, and then they changed things up. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's true or it was ever true or not. We'll never
Mhm.
know. But point is, people thought Rebels, the show, was going to be the rebels who stole the Death Star plans, and then obviously the reason why we don't see them is because uh, they make the big sacrifice to get the plans, and obviously that doesn't happen. Their
Right.
contribution is get rid of Thrawn, which you know, in terms of the wider universe that we have now, of course, that's a big deal. We're seeing the repercussions of that now. Let's see, 2018, like 3 years later, maybe later, but you know what I mean. Um,
Pictures
but
later. Yeah.
but in the context of like comparing Rebels to Rogue One,
Mhm.
Rogue One has that direct implication of
Yeah.
serving the wider story because it's kind of the most important thing to
Yeah.
get the original Star Wars movie up and running. While with Rebels, um, you at least at the time you could kind of remove Rebels from the equation, and you kind of don't lose anything in the picture. Um, Obviously
Mhm.
now I don't think that's true because now Rebels is paying off some big dividends.
Yeah.
Um, but at the time, I think people thought Rebels was going to be Rogue One, and Rebels kind of wasn't Rogue One. And I think also because
Mhm.
Clone Wars, go back to that,
Yeah.
Clone
Here's
Wars,
another
it
example.
did have Anakin, Obi-Wan, it had all the main players.
Mhm.
The only new character, and I think they were wise because they did add the original new character in Ahsoka. So there is kind of the new kid on the block, the kind of like, for anyone who's like, well, we know what's going to happen to all these characters. Clone Wars could serve her story. And then obviously, well, I can get to Clone Wars a bit later because there's some parts about Clone Wars which kind of equates to the comics right now.
Mm.
But people kind of had this more like, well, Clone Wars is of course important. It's about the big characters we all know from the movies, and then Rebels doesn't have that. And when they do show up, it's like for an episode. Um, and then at the end, it kind of really doesn't become part of anything because at the end of the day, it's like, oh, they got rid of Thrawn, and then yeah, they were part of the rebellion, and yeah, they didn't steal the Death Star plans. Ultimately, of course, I still love Rebels, and ultimately now, Rebels is kind of the most going to be a cornerstone of a movie, in a couple of years. But you know what I'm talking about, I think, right? I hope I'm getting this through.
So people had these expectations about just how much it would tie in, and that kind of colored their sense of where's the story going, what's happening.
I think back then, especially, people looked at the things in terms of very much more in terms of like, how does this serve the saga? So Wanzu at that time 9, and I will ultimately say, and I think we're getting more into talking about tie-in than time, but that's okay. Ultimately, I think since the saga has ended, I think we've moved away from, at least internally, thinking about that. Like, even when we get stuff like Hux and stuff, I think that's just more Filoni just kind of seeing an opportunity. But I don't think he's interested in this. I don't think he's primarily interested in serving the saga. I think he's more interested in telling his own saga about Thrawn's return and how we're going to kick his butt.
Well, that raises a whole another interesting thing is, well, and similar to what I was saying about droids, is where this Mandoverse is. It's in this pocket of time, so distant from a film that we're not so concerned about it tracking the rise of Snoke and the First Order and all that. This Imperial remnant can be connected. It doesn't have to be connected. It's fine. It's just that, with Return of the Jedi coming up, or the fact that we don't know, and that's the thing, which is so it's so weird, and because it's the main characters, right? If it's Luke, Han, Leia are there, right? Lando,
right?
And Vader, right? Where are they? What are they going? And that's that's why, I go back to the Rebels example. I mean, it's funny. Wasn't part of that whole conversation about are they going to be still the Death Star plans?
You can talk to Dominic about that when
I think I have. I think I've asked him what he was getting at.
Hi, Dominic, if you're listening.
I don't know if he is. I heard the microwave go off. I think he's getting food.
Oh, yummy.
For me, it's fine. It does what it needed to do. I mean, that's the thing is the overall story is first off Ezra going from Space Aladdin to a hero. I mean, slightly problematic, but going from the street rat to actually embracing the Force and the will of the Force for his life and whatnot. It's also about Sabine and her journey with Mandalore. That we will see. I mean, we'll see connect up probably in Mandoverse now that we've seen her in Ahsoka.
Right.
But the way the clock, maybe this is the way the clock is this galactic clock of where's the rebellion at, and that's why Hera, her involvement in this, her going from just this leader of the small cell to becoming a general, and then of course in Ahsoka she is the general. She's basically the commander in chief, if you will. Maybe not, but she's definitely up there. Enough to say no to orders, make her own orders, and all that.
Right.
The galactic clock is the clock we already know of. And this is the problem with the franchise, but also the fun, interesting thing about the sandbox. The sandbox has borders and has boundaries, and it has the things we're being given. Is if we say 4 years before A New Hope, we also want to at least have a sense of the growing coalescing rebellion that we see in Rogue One and in A New Hope. And so
I
You
I'll
know,
just
and they do, I found they always did such a great job with that in Rebels. So
well, I'll use Clone Wars again as the example because I
mhm,
think in a weird way, Clone Wars mirrors what's going on with the comics.
yeah,
I think even better than
completely.
Rebels, quite frankly, in terms of okay, we are retroactively adding material in between Attack of the Clones and about to say New Hope, and Revenge of the Sith. You know, the fans' brains are going, okay, so like, we can go all the way up to the Battle of Coruscant, kind of what and we did do that. We have proof. We like that was the 2D Clone Wars show that like was the
Mhm,
prequel to Revenge of the Sith. But then as we kept going and we kept going, we kept going, the kind of the thing we had to kind of wrap our heads around, like, okay, we all kind of think Revenge of the Sith, that opening shot is like how is kind of our final end game here. But then we keep adding things like Darth Maul's back. Wait, what's going on over there?
yeah,
Who's Ahsoka? What do we mean Anakin had an apprentice? She didn't look like he had an apprentice in the movies. Um, um, all the other little stuff with Ventress and all the plot points with her and stuff like that. Um, and weirdly, Clone Wars season 7, especially, although season 5 could have ended it just as well.
mhm,
But I like the way season 7 kind of resolves it better. Ultimately, is it decides, you know what? No, we're not going to make the final. It's our Clone Wars' goal is not to link up with Revenge of the Sith. It's to
mhm,
run parallel from it because it's Ahsoka's story and
yeah,
all those plot threads. Well, not all of them, because some of them get
mhm,
don't always get resolved like Venture, sadly. But the kind of the big one with Maul, which kind of dominated by the end, it's sort of interesting looking at Clone Wars, the first episode, or with the movie. It's classic, an evil Dooku plan, adventurous, the
yeah,
droids. The final episode, the final arc of Clone Wars boils down to Maul, Mandos, Ahsoka, and Rex. Where it's like it's not even about the war between the Separatists and the Republic anymore. It's almost this other thing, weirdly, with Darth Maul kind of
yeah.
being
I mean, yeah, it's about everything on Mandalore, especially.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I can guarantee you that the discourse probably around that was like, how are all these adventures happening before Revenge of the Sith? What
yeah,
the heck is going on here? Like, what's like? Wait, Palpatine's old apprentice is back. How's that gonna get resolved? And did Palpatine know? And where? It's like never felt like Anakin talked about an apprentice during all of Revenge of the Sith.
mhm,
I mean, ultimately we love it because we love those stories and they're great. But you can kind of feel like we're adding a lot of stuff here. Some
yeah,
big plot points and like galaxy things. Like, is it all just going to get resolved? Is Maul going to die by the end? Can kind of just keep it all in this little Clone Wars bubble. Ultimately, it didn't, and it
mhm.
did. Maul did move forward.
I mean,
Maul,
we saw Twin Suns before we saw everything Rebels before we saw Siege of Mandalore. But
yeah, I mean, even though George might have had plans to make Maul come back for his sequel trilogy,
true,
how much of that would have happened, who knows? But
yeah,
some of these plot points were going to go beyond the Clone Wars, right? Like, I wish Ventress was one of those plot points because I think Ventress deserved to live.
mhm,
But I won't get into that. But you kind of know what I'm talking about, and I think
yeah,
there's two things to go back to the comics for a second. One, I do think you're right about the time thing, but also I do wonder how much of what I guess I'm going to call it cleanup are they going to do before we get to Return of the Jedi, and how much is there going to be is there a plan, or is there just like, what, let's just start setting up stuff for the post Return of the Jedi stuff, because that's where the real storylines are going to be, and we can
mhm,
just kind of get some backdrop here, which is kind of what Rebels did.
yeah.
Whether that was the plan or not, I mean, probably not when they started, but
I think
certainly
Filoni had a glimmer in his eye. Like
maybe by the end, for the
yeah,
end, certainly it's like,
yeah,
okay, we got rid of Thrawn, but now this can come back in a big way later.
yeah,
And I do wonder if like we're maybe we also I feel like we're talking about when we talk about timelines. I feel like we're kind of like,
mhm,
I think maybe we as fans especially have this thing of like Clone Wars ends and everything has to wrap up nice and neat, and we're not kind of thinking what moves on. Like maybe a plot point could start in the Clone Wars, and in the original trilogy era, and in the sequel trilogy era. For all we know, go on,
I
keep
mean,
going.
there's a
Because
whole thing
Ahsoka,
that gets introduced at season 7 of Clone Wars that's spun off into its own series called the Bad Batch.
right? I mean,
Right? It's
Ahsoka's
big,
spinning off to three whole eras, so
yeah,
she's going strong. So maybe there's also
yeah.
a bit of that as well. But I will tell you, I
Mhm.
know for a fact, if like people were like all these adventures in
Yeah.
3 years, and that was 3 years, and that's more believable than 1 year. So
Yeah.
or like,
So what bring up the Clone Wars example gets me thinking, okay, once these comics are done, we're gonna have a better sense of things and we're gonna feel like it makes more sense and feel more coherent about it. Because first of all, we'll just know. And there's something about the fact that having it already in our mind,
Mhm,
looking back to say, okay, this is how it made sense, this is how it
mhm,
fits. You know, now, like I was saying off the top with Ahsoka and predictability, right? Now we can look back at season 5. This is already season 5 of a 3-year story. Now that ends and
mhm,
say, okay, Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order is part of what makes Anakin feel
mhm,
isolated and alone, and the Jedi may be corrupt and not being able to see everything with Palpatine. Oh, okay, this is how this contributes to the galactic clock that is Anakin's fall to the dark side and the rise of the Empire, right?
right.
But we only see that in retrospect, and then we got this whole weird wild thing about Yoda and the this is season 6 and the Netflix things.
I love those.
Y-
I love those arcs,
Yoda,
but it's not a good
yeah.
season finale. It's not a
Well,
good
it's not a
season
season
finale.
finale at all, and that's kind of we got what you're getting at is there's just all these random anthology arcs, and that's the thing about Clone Wars. I can see now looking back, okay, probably people watching it in it was like, okay, all these random anthologies cobbled together. Where's the whole overall story? With the comics now, there's all these arcs that are cobbled together. Where's the overall story? Where's our sense of that? Maybe this is what I'm getting at is looking back now on Clone Wars. It's my favorite series of all time. I see this coherent, very consistent, very clear sense of the passage of time in Ahsoka's character, in even just in the stories about the clones and their particular differentiation, and those are big words, them being actual characters, especially Rex, especially Cody and whatnot, and the rest too. uh the Embarn arc and Embarn, that's the species, slightly more species Embarn, that's a whole other thing. We can look back and say, okay, this makes sense. We have a sense of the pace and the flow of it, right?
And the
The
payoff
time of
too,
it,
and the
and the
dividends.
well, this is what I'm getting at,
Mhm,
is we know what the payoff is,
right.
whereas with these comics we don't fully know yet. And so it would be nice if it were a little clearer.
Mhm,
um there have been moments, especially in the Vader comic, I think, and that's why I don't think it's a problem, where there have been, especially everything with Sabe, I actually really loved. It felt a little drawn out again. Some things didn't have to be as maybe 3 or 4 issues too long, but uh well, the payoff, and that's the thing with Dark Droids, is that the payoff wasn't there. And so, except to say, now the only big payoff we can see is, again, what I was saying about the way Vader can now control these droids, and being part of the Schism Imperial, or the cyborgs rather, being part of the Schism Imperial, and what that might have to do with his response, his approach to Palpatine in Return of the Jedi.
Well,
We can
you
see
talk.
that, but we don't know, and
Wait,
that's it's kind of we're kind of
mhm.
in the dark here.
Do you think though we're
Yeah.
too movie Return of the Jedi focused in general? Because like one of the big things, and I think when you saw season 5 of Clone War, people were like, okay, Ahsoka's gone. Now it ties in better with the film.
Yeah.
But Ahsoka, quite frankly, has tied in better with future projects like Rebels that happened after Revenge of the Sith, this Mandoverse stuff. And I do wonder, maybe we're looking too much of it being like it all meets Return of the Jedi. When Ahsoka eventually she went way past Revenge of the Sith, and maybe like that's more their point of like,
Yeah, I mean, that's another possibility, right? I mean,
go
the Bad
beyond
Batch
that.
example, but yeah, you're talking about Rebels and you're talking about Ahsoka's show.
And just the
They
movie.
did a convincing enough job, a compelling enough job to also connect to Revenge of the Sith with what I'm saying with Ahsoka leaving, right? To also do that, I mean everything with Anakin, Padme being pregnant, right? I mean that's there's a biological clock for you. There's a passage of
Yeah.
time for you. Humans gestation period 9 months. We can tell we know what a baby bump is and all that. So
Right. But that's the thing is
but
that these arcs have gone past. It's not just get
so
wrap up
yeah,
at Revenge of
so
the Sith.
that's another thought is what are they setting up for afterwards? Are they going to go into are we going to get more? We haven't gotten much of Luke's story between, like I've said this before, between Endor and Jakku. We've only gotten one little snippet of that in the Battlefront 2 story. We haven't gotten much. So yeah, I mean, maybe they're seeding things in and setting things up.
Sabe meets Luke and Leia after Endor. Now that I would read.
Yeah, it's possible. That'd be
Uh,
interesting. That'd be interesting. I don't know. Um, And yeah, again, maybe to your point and to my point before, we don't know yet. And it was just it's the kind of thing at New York Comic Con they might have announced. They might have told us. There isn't a celebration coming up. There isn't a con where they usually announce these things until maybe San Diego when they don't really announce these things. So I mean that gets at the real world perception of time is yeah, we're fumbling in the dark here. Um, as we just don't know. And so maybe if we have a better sense, we'll have a better connection, including to the Vader. Maybe we'll appreciate the Vader comic more if we have a better sense of these things.
maybe. I mean, that again. Clone Wars. We kind of didn't know what would come after Clone Wars.
Yeah,
I mean, that was all. I mean, came after Clone Wars was a buyout and the transformation of Star Wars.
exactly.
So but and in the Lucas days, it's like it's like I guess it's all just has to kind of wrap up nicely to get fit Revenge of the Sith, and then
Mhm.
obviously it went on briefly on Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Bo-Katan's story got to be part of two eras. Ahsoka's she's gonna be going on probably forever as long as Dave's around.
Mhm.
It also helps, I think, and I think it's just something we don't consider. Um, you know, these authors are sticking around, and I think I wanted to say this during the Dark Droids thing, and I don't think I got to, but as long as Charles Soule's still writing for Star Wars, I think there's a high chance Dark Droid will pay off, or have a
Yeah.
sequel, you know, because Dave Filoni stuck around and wasn't fired when the shakeup happened. Those arcs from Clone Wars have continued on. Um, you know,
Mhm.
so I mean, I mean, hey, you never know. Like, it wasn't guaranteed that other authors are going to pick up some of this stuff,
Yeah.
for sure. So you kind of have those authors just building on themselves. So if Soul gets a chance to do a post Endor story, he might decide, oh, we're going to
He
continue.
probably will. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah,
He more than anyone else is built on what he's done before. I mean, he's still writing a Lando Lobot story, right?
yeah,
He's still
exactly.
writing that. When he wrote that the first thing we learned about Momin in this arc, he brought Momin back. He's bringing this Lando Lobot arc story
Kim Zahn's
from
still
that.
doing his Thrawn thing.
Yeah, Tim Zahn's doing his Thrawn thing. Yeah, it's true. And the ideas in Dark Droids are very Charles Soule. They're very heady, almost Jonathan Hickman level sort of. I mean, that's this is an aside. This is an aside. If Hickman ever wrote a Star War, I don't think he ever can. It's just his concepts are just too high concept. I don't know if he'll be
He's
able
too
to
big a
restrain
name.
it.
I don't think Story Group could control Jonathan Hickman.
Yeah, that's my point. It's just he's just yeah.
But
Yeah. So
no, but yeah, I think that is also
yeah.
critical. Is you got these authors still writing these storylines? Like, here's kind of I'll use sort of an interesting one. I feel like we're not talking about time, but I'm sorry. This was
We're
definitely
talking
very
about the flow of story, the
right.
experience of story
But
is what we're talking about.
here's kind of an interesting example of where I think this hasn't happened because an author isn't with us anymore. He's not dead. Chuck Wendig. I feel because Chuck Wendig hasn't done Star Wars and kind of got fired unofficially. Um, any sort of concepts he might have been he was introducing in Aftermath didn't really get fleshed out. Like Gallius Rex has not showed up in anything, and
Where's
I
Ray
do mean
Sloan?
anything. Ray
Where's Ray
Sloan's
Sloan?
well, Ray Sloan's different. Well, hey, she was in
That's true.
Squadrons,
She was in Scotchins.
Squadron,
Yeah.
and she's not a Chuck Wendig character.
True.
John Jackson Miller
She's a John
technically
Jackson Miller character.
technically created him.
Guess
So
who's coming back to write a Star Wars? Set in
hey,
different timeline. But anyway.
I mean, yeah, but she is. I don't think she's necessarily like a author creation in the same way, but she's gotten mentioned in a few things. But
Yeah.
Sloane's definitely been mentioned around, so she's not like she's been completely
True.
forgotten.
It's just a fun fandom thing to say, where's Ray Sloan?
I know, but Rax is with a
Yeah.
creation of his hasn't shown up. The Acolyte Beyond did show up in Shadows of the Sith, so that was nice.
Mhm.
But they would have shown up in other things. But again, Chuck Winter got fired. So again, I do wonder if because Chuck
Yeah.
Winter gets fired, he doesn't get to build upon his work in Aftermath. And really, we're only kind of lucky that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni really like Cobb Vanth as an idea. So
Yeah. I mean, another thing they've built up on, especially Filoni in Ahsoka, is this whole question that we're going to hopefully dive into in the next few weeks. We've talked about before with Mon Mothma and building a government out of a rebellion. That is something that Life Debt really goes into really well. So,
yeah.
but that's just, I mean, that's the circumstance. But here's the thing: that's the passage of time, right? That this republic has been around for 5 years, has been back for 5 years. They're further along in that from that sense. I mean, not, and this is getting at the paper screen relationship, but for those of us who our brains are situated in, and my brain, I keep hearing this, Mark Thompson, Mon Mothma to Leia, we're building a government, and that government is now built in, when Hera is going before this committee, and the same tensions are playing out, but they're further along. There's still
Doesn't technically Leia is right at the end of the take. It's like she's like, I'm out of this government. I'm starting my own paramilitary group.
Sure, but again, for now though, they're still giving it a shot, and they've given it a shot. And in Ahsoka, by the time we see that, we can see they've given it a shot. We've experienced the passage of time through that moment, right?
Here's something even more interesting if we want to talk about the passage of time and trying to reconcile what we see on screen versus what the book said. In Bloodline, the idea is that the Republic is very peaceful. They're a success story. Like, they did it. They no big problems. Obviously, we in Mandoverse are seeing a very big blue problem coming their way. So the question, of course, is, are they going to bother with the whole, there was lots of peace? Because that's the idea. That's the kind of the initial reasoning for why we don't get a lot of Luke, Han, and Leia stories, because they didn't do much. Kind of nice. There was no big wars. There was no conflict.
They got to retire.
Yeah, they kind of got to retire. Han got to be a kind of a weird racer producer person. Luke did his Jedi thing, and Leia
didn't retire. That's not true at all. She did lots of work, and I want to see those stories.
I mean, but she didn't get to she didn't get to participate in a big war, and
Luke got to go do his doctorate, is what he did.
Yeah, he got his Jedi doctorate. It was all great. But the original Thrawn campaign was very extensive. I mean, Thrawn did attack Coruscant in that original trilogy. But also only lasted for 1 year. The whole trilogy, I think, is only a year-long story.
The 90s Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah, the 90s Thrawn trilogy is a year-long story, and I think that's only because a Essential Guide said so. But so there's the big question of if they want to reconcile the whole there was peace in between Starkiller Base blowing up, the Hosnian government and Return of the Jedi, is how extensive is Thrawn's campaign against the New Republic going to be? Is he going to attack the core worlds? Are we going to have another battle of Coruscant up above? Or is it going to be not that extensive, maybe more in the periphery, kind of like with the Nile, but with the Republic kind of ignoring it, and not last that long? Like, timeline-wise, Mandoverse has only gone for a year.
Yeah. I mean, that one, I suspect they're going to just retcon Claudia Gray. Yeah. And again, that's another thing. Speaking of the passage of time, that book came out 7 years ago, whenever that was. We're kind of not if I mean this gets at the whole sequel trilogy versus the
Well, the
paper
sequel
versus
trilogy
screen
itself
thing.
is only a year long.
Well, the whole paper versus screen, for reading, this is a thing about passage of time. Just thinking of this now, reading Resistance Reborn. I bring this up all the time because this is just the example. And I know I'm not salty about it anymore, but just the example. Reading Resistance Reborn, seeing Wedge adopting Snap, seeing all that, and then seeing the scene where Snap dies and then Wedge comes in, guns a blazing, woohoo! That very quickly in short order is a whiplash. Reading Bloodline in 2017, and then say seeing 2025 or whenever this film comes out, and seeing actually no, it turns out that was it was a major cataclysm, a major conflict. Not so worried about it, and it also didn't seem to be as important a fact in Bloodline either. So yeah, I mean, I guess the Republic had gotten a bit complacent, but yeah,
I mean, I'd be curious. We'll just have to see what the conflict actually looks like when we
yeah,
see, which I'm curious about just in general. But yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's always something interesting. I mean, that's the one thing I don't like about the sequels. Honestly, is it's only a year long. It's 1 year long, and like Force Awakens and Last Jedi only takes place over the course of like a week, probably, maybe a little more. But even then, it's not that much. It's like, it's like with the prequels, at least you got like years in between those films, and then with the originals, it's like you got a good 2 to
I'm
couple
awake. I'm
months in
alive.
between.
Sorry.
So lots of comics can be made and books and
True.
stuff. Um, and then with the sequel trilogy, it's a year, 1 year. The First Order only. That's actually something I think people don't talk about. First Order only ruled the whole galaxy or the key systems for a
Mhm.
year, 1 year, and then they lost.
Yeah.
So talk about New Republic being a failure. First Order only lasted a year. People, it got kicked in the butt
I
pretty,
mean,
pretty quickly.
thinking about that, one of the things that affects our sense of time is just how much we see of the First Order, right? How much of the marketing campaign was there?
Oh yeah,
These novels, right? Resistance Reborn and Crash of Fate and Galaxy's Edge. Getting to go, if you go to Galaxy's, and this is another weird, incredibly, probably the weirdest timely-wimely thing in all of Star Wars, is going to Batuu. And we kind of get it. Our brains are able to, adult brains are able to, okay, this is a theme park. We understand that part. But when you think about it, and you don't think about it too long, but we're going, and it's supposed to be a specific day in the galaxy. Never mind that, yes, Ahsoka is there and Hera's there and whoever. That's fine.
they gave up on that quick.
Yeah,
Which I
but
don't blame them. I don't think you could ever.
okay, fair enough. But still, we see Kylo Ren there. We see the First Order there. We see them there having that presence. Whenever I go back to Galaxy's Edge, whenever you go see a YouTube video of Galaxy's Edge, you're going to see the First Order Resistance conflict. And it's kind of this frozen in time thing. And I think that just gives us this impression of how significant it is. I mean, the classic example is the Palpatine's empire, the Galactic Empire.
Mhm.
That's only 20 years, right? 25 years or something. Now it does have the massive implications, wide-ranging implications. The Clone War has these massive, wide-ranging implications that we're only now starting to sort out with Rey's film, right? But the end of the Jedi Order 66. I
I
mean,
mean, the
that takes
First
place.
Order Resistance conflict, not the Clone Wars. We said race.
No, I'm talking about different things. I'm talking, multiple things. So the Empire
Right.
is only 25 years. The Clone War is only 3 years, right? They have, I mean, it's possible, World War II was 6 years. It shapes the world today. We live in today.
World War
And
One shapes the world we live in today.
yeah, well, that's true. And that was only how many years? 4 years
14,
too.
15, 16,
It was 4
17,
years, 5
5
years.
years.
You know, but that kind of gives us an outsized sense of that we're constantly living in it in a way. We're still living in that world, in that reality. I mean,
That's interesting. Can I
do I
bring up
want to
something?
do I want to go there? I mean, here's the thing about. I mean, probably because it's deeply traumatic, right? There's a conflict going on in a certain part of the world, um, where both sides are intractable and hate each other because they're both living in this moment of oppression by the Nazis and by the British, right?
Yeah,
By Israelis, you know, they're
dang
living.
British.
I mean, this is kind of my read of the just Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Really, um, how many Israelis, even third generation after, fourth generation after, are still living in the reality of the Holocaust? How many Palestinians, and they feel it more intimately, I think, but are still living in the reality of the Nakba, and that clouds all their decisions and everything the way they see the world. It has this outsized influence. It has this outsized sense of time dilation. In a fictional universe, our experience of going to Batu, we have this. It's this weird metaphor, and I hope I'm being careful and delicate about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I actually
You
have a
know,
better example
well,
actually
what I'm saying is,
than
we
Batu.
we, we go and we see all these this marketing campaign up for Galaxy's Edge, and just the reality. We think that the First Order is this dominant force, and yes, Ray says the First Order will. This is what I was getting at before. Will
It's
control
very
all the major
rambly. I don't.
systems, but
Uh,
yeah.
I got a better
Anyway,
example. Let me give you a
yeah.
better example here. I got a better way to example.
Mhm.
I'll use one from Legends. Get a better
Okay.
example. Okay, so in Legends, there
Mhm.
is this conflict called the Great Hyperspace War.
Yes.
It's the first conflict between the Sith Empire and the Republic Jedi.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia and according to source books, it only lasts for like a year, maybe like
Yeah.
two. Not that long. Shorter than Clone Wars, right? Retroactively, because of other authors and obviously the history that was created around it, that conflict had so many repercussions and um fallout
Mhm.
that it's nuts.
Yeah.
Like that conflict that leads into another Sith war, and then another Sith war, and then the Revan thing, and then the Vitiate thing, and the
Right.
Sith always remember it. They hate the Jedi for it even more. And it goes all the way back, even goes further and further down the line to Palpatine. Palpatine still thinks about that conflict, and it's like, oh, if only I had been there, I could have beaten them. Like, so that conflict lasts for 1 year, maybe
Yeah.
two, and repercussions for thousands of years.
Right.
There you go. Uh,
So, and
that's,
that makes sense.
mhm.
It's just weird to think about with our sense of story and time, but
I mean, yeah, and then you look at the Clone Wars. Like the Clone
yeah,
Wars is the repercussions of the Clone Wars we still feel in universe to this day, with
yeah.
stuff like the Mandoverse, even.
I mean, well, everything to do with the where are the Jedi? Where are they around? Why isn't there a temple over there? I mean, that's also the Nile
Right.
problem. But yeah, I mean, well, how long is Order 66 supposed to take? Right. That
Right.
initial thrust, it's got to be what, a day,
Probably
maybe.
day, maybe a
Yeah.
couple hours, depending on how long Palpatine
So
got.
I mean,
Oh,
I guess what I'm coming to is, yeah, even in our own world, time isn't necessarily linear, and so we have an outsized sense of the longevity. We kind of our brains maybe think that importance is longevity because the impact of it goes longer. But yeah, we kind of experience, maybe our brains experience the reality of something, a reality of something happening, especially something traumatic happening well past when the actual event is happening. And so yeah, I mean, maybe that's kind of our sense of story replicates that in a way of saying we can spend 7 years talking about telling the story of this war that takes place for 3 years, but it's appropriate that we have a sense of gravity, not in a literal way,
mhm.
but in that this literally was this long. But maybe, I mean, I just think about the Clone Wars and I care about the Clone Wars so much that prequelist here. Yeah. I guess I'm not. I don't know what kind of conclusion I'm trying to make here, but
Well, I
other
mean,
than to say,
you have a conflict
yeah,
that
yeah. Well, just to say that, yeah, time is a metaphor. Time in fiction is a uh is an icon of how important something is and how critical something is. And so that's the thing I talk about. Again, I said at the top, novels have the ability to take the time to go into details, and an author is going to take the time and take you through details because of how important something is. So I mean, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, there's an example. The War of the Ring, what, that's how many years? A few years?
1 year.
That's 1 year. It took how many years to make those films? Took Tolkien how many years to write those books? Take someone how many years to read those books? How much all that detail packed in there? Maybe as a way of saying this is world forming. This 1 year event is civilization forming, and so let's take the time to express it.
I mean, I mean, that house in that real world too. It's like, 1,000 years of Russian czardom, and then it's all gone in a month.
Yeah.
Um, or even, I'll use Star Wars again. The Clone Wars lasts 3 years. We have 8 seasons of battles, adventures, and whatnots, and who's it's,
Yeah.
and who's it's. And then we get to Revenge of the Sith. Um, that's movie's a week old.
Yeah.
Battle of Coruscant, Jedi gone, Anakin's dark side, Padme dead, all in a week. And then that feels like a movie that's for like 20 years of history just happened in a week.
Yeah. I think, yeah, what I'm saying here. So yeah, we get too nerdy about it, right? I'm gonna start using that phrase. We get too geeky about it and geek out, and that's fine. I think to geek out, but yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, how does a storyteller determine how long a story needs to be? And I think part of that is how important are the details, and then how important is this moment in time to a character's story, right? One person's story, right? Could be so significant, and so we're going to take the time to go through it, even if when they're 40, 50 years old. Okay, we're going to take 7 years to go through Ahsoka's journey here, so that when she's 50 years old, and how many 15 years later, we could have an episode detailing everything that's so significant about those 7 years. Yeah, but also, that also involves the rise of the empire and whatnot. So,
Well, history doesn't just begin when the character's journey starts, right? That's A New Hope. It's like you had this empire and this republic, but the story starts when these two little droids find themselves on a farm on Tatooine. This kid Luke finds them.
I mean, Clone Wars starts right in the middle of the war, right? Or not in the middle, but like right about Christophsis and all that.
Right, and Revenge of the Sith starts at the final battle of the war, where it's like, oh shoot, now things are really starting. The status quo of the war is starting to change.
I mean, that's the Star Wars thing, in the middle of the thing, in media res.
Especially.
Yeah.
We talked a lot. I think one kind of final thing we can just kind of be a little future oriented, because that'd be fun.
Yeah.
We hopefully might have a Ray film on our hands sooner rather than later. I hope or pray. But that film, you talked last time about all the stuff about what happened after Rise of Skywalker. But that film's going to take place 15 years after that movie. So how much cleanup has already been done in terms of like the situation of the galaxy? And ultimately, where are we starting with that film outside of course just the general 15 years, right? Like, I think that's the thing everyone wants to kind of know, like, what is the status quo of the galaxy 15 years later? How many Jedi does Rey have? Does she have one? Does she have 20? Does she have none? Is there a Senate? Is the flotilla gone? Is the First Order been cleaned up? I hope so. It's going to be 15 years. Ultimately, the context of those 15 years will probably matter, but what matters is also where the character starts. And for all we know, maybe it'll start with a new character that Rey lands on their planet. And it's like, hey, you got force powers. Want to join my Jedi school? And the character's like, okay. And then we follow them.
Yeah.
But Yeah. They said they're set. Well, the few reasons why I think they're setting it at 15 years, in my
Mm,
opinion. One, so they don't have to deal with the immediate aftermath of Rise of Skywalker. Gives them some space, kind
right.
of soft
Yeah,
reboot a little bit. Two, so Daisy Ridley can be her actual age, and Ray can be an actual age because Ray's only 18, 19 throughout the entire sequel trilogy.
true.
Daisy Ridley's in her 30s. Very
Is
lovely.
she really? She's that old now, eh?
She's
This old?
definitely not. She's older than me, but she's certainly. Yeah, Daisy Ridley. I'll look it up later, but yeah, she's
I'm
certainly.
looking at now. 1992. So she's 32.
Okay, she's 2 years older than
She's
me.
31.
She's 2 years older than me.
Okay.
So yeah.
She
So
seems
yeah,
so young.
I know. But yeah,
Yeah.
she's 31. Ray can be at least 31 ish. Yeah, probably
Yeah.
around that age. So those are kind of like the two big reasons I think they kind of want to do the
Yeah.
15-year time jump, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
I mean, to say the obvious thing or the intelligent thing, yeah. I mean, all those details about a government and whatnot. How much does Sharmino Obaid need to situate Ray in the galaxy? And that's the thing. Where in the galactic clock, our sense of time, is this right? Well, and here's what it's important. Well, it's different if it's a real character. We need to know. I mean, we need to know when Oppenheimer is in relation to where this scene is set in relation to World War II and the bomb and all that.
Right.
When that's set. But anyway, where if we, all those details, how much does she need to give us in order to situate us in that sense of time? I mean, what we're going to see is what has she learned? How has she grown in confidence and maturity? Um, in struggle and in difficulty, right? That's another thing, fascinating thing with Ahsoka in Rebels. She's seen some stuff. She's been through some stuff. She's a lot more reserved and clipped.
Mhm.
And then she opens up a little bit. Then in Ahsoka, she's still there. She's been darker. She's seen more stuff. And then once she finally confronts her role with Anakin and how she isn't actually guilty for it, the weight lifts and she's able to actually embrace a lot of what we remember when she was a teenager, right? The fun, playful, laughing side. With Ray, yeah, a lot of those details will I think will help. Again, it's setting. It's what's her role, what's her importance in the story, what's her importance to us, and how do we build a sense of how do the storytellers build a sense of importance for us, and they do that I think both through
Mhm.
that setting and through character growth and just character presence and Daisy Ridley's presence. I trust Sherman Obachino to get the balance right, to get the sense of how much does she care about situating us nerd fans, the fans who don't care as much, just the fans who are just showing up to a Star Wars because they want to go see a Star Wars. That's also another tricky thing. Yeah, this 15 years. What does that 15 years mean? And what will it mean for us? What will it mean for Ray, etc. What will it mean
Uh,
for Finn?
or yeah, or Poe, Rose, if they're in it.
All of them, yeah.
But yeah, I think weirdly they sort of laid it out in Celebration. This is Master Ray Skywalker. She's not wet behind the ears, just trying to figure her place in the galaxy. Trying to figure herself out, realizing, oh shoot, I'm related to the most evil person in the universe.
Right.
Um, this is her, like, she's now a mentor. She's gonna be mentoring kids or teens or
Mhm.
young adults now. She's gonna have some wisdom behind her. This is
Yeah.
just kind of everything we all wanted to see with Luke, but we either won't or we can't because we don't want to recast or we don't want to do animated. So we get Daisy Ridley now,
Yeah.
which is great. I love
Okay.
it. But
And
this
to
is
say that the contrast then is the way that they'll give us that sense of the passage of time. Yeah.
right. I expect to still see that the Ray we all knew. Like see a bit of the Ray we all love from the of the sequel, but she's probably more sure of herself. She's probably a lot
Mhm.
more. She's read the Jedi text. She kind of knows what the boring parts are and what maybe to just improvise. Hopefully, but obviously, you still want to give her some challenge too. So it's like, okay, new batch of students.
Mhm.
Here I go. She may be a little nervous, but she's certainly not, like, where are my parents? Who she's probably over that stuff at
Right.
that point. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's the biggest way to show past time. It's just more mature adult Ray. You
In
know,
in a situation with more responsibility, right?
right?
Responsibility for the future, and that's I mean that's something the way Star Wars is played with, especially the Last Jedi,
Hmm.
right? And Empire too, but Last Jedi especially pass on what you have learned to be in the place where you're receiving that is in the place of youth as at one point in time. I mean we do see it a little. We see Luke wrestling with it, right?
Hmm.
That's the contrast with Empire, where he's receiving it and making it his own and saying, no, I gotta go to Bespin. I gotta go figure this out. And then, especially in Return of the Jedi, only 6 months later, a bunch of comics later, um, that's a joke. Saying, okay, now I'm gonna confront Vader and have the be a have the foresight to throw away the lightsaber and say, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. That passage of time, and then we see him wrestling with it in a different way after everything with Kylo and with Ben and Kylo and all that. With Ray, yeah, it's a different circumstance of with Last Jedi, especially we see her as the one receiving and making it her own, and Skywalker as well. I do think in this Ray film that her being a Skywalker and being a Palpatine, I do think there's still something there that they're going to have to look at and she's going to have to either deal with or show us how she had dealt with it, because in Rise of Skywalker we haven't seen really how she's dealt with it, with everything about her lineage fully, and so her lineage and her chosen lineage as a Skywalker and what that means for her. I hope we do see that. I mean, that's the interesting thing, and this is another topic we're going to talk about in the next few weeks. This is kind of what we're getting at overall. Is this the weird thing with Star Wars is character continuity? These characters exist, and character development cannot simply be restricted to one story the way it can be in other media, other franchises, other things in a standalone story. It can, and we don't see them again if we don't see them again. But if we do see a character again,
Hmm.
how are they built up? How have Lando and Lobot and their relationship being enriched over time? Comparing how, where is Ray in her life, in her ability to pass on what she's learned, her wrestling with that as a new situation in light of what she's come before.
Right. Funny enough, you brought up Return of the Jedi, and there's actually something about Luke's character which I haven't seen a lot of in the comics yet, and I'm curious when we start to see this particular trait. I'm
Mhm.
sorry we're going back, but you just brought this up.
Yeah.
Um, so in Return of the Jedi, Luke does this thing which I always say the front, where he's very like he pretends to be I am Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
And to me that's always up front. Like that's not his real personality. He's just
Yeah.
kind of like he's playing up that
More
Jedi,
serene.
I know, Father.
Yeah.
Um, I've noticed in the comics he hasn't been like that yet. He's kind of not as like, I am a Jedi Knight, Jabba. Yes, Father, I
Yeah.
will confront you. He's still a little bit of that kind of Empire, a little bit of that, like kind of that still got a little bit the boyishness, young,
Mhm.
kind of very, uh, soft before
The
he
way
kind of,
he is on the skiff, and when,
yeah,
when
and
he's jumping off the springboard.
or even with Vader and the Emperor, it's like,
Yeah.
well, you're not, your overconfidence is your weakness. Before
Yeah.
ultimately, Vader pokes him with Leia, like then he loses his mind, he loses his temper.
Yeah.
But he's kind of very
Very
almost
calm.
pretending to be like what a prequel Jedi or just a Jedi. What do you think the Jedi is like?
Yeah.
Calm, stern, and like right now in the comics, he's kind of not that. He's still kind of
Detached. He's showing
detached.
Jedi detachment.
Yeah,
for
he's
sure.
kind of not that yet in the comics. I've noticed from what I've read. Still, he's kind of still got a little bit of that fun side to him,
Hmm.
like a
Yeah,
little.
I'd agree with that.
So I do wonder maybe when you start to see him kind of put on the front
Yeah,
of detached Master Sky Jedi Knight Skywalker.
yeah,
I think you'll start to see maybe more of like, okay, now we are getting to Return of the Jedi because now he's doing this thing.
it's a good point.
Where
Maybe
uh,
Wednesday.
maybe Wednesday. I hope maybe
That's
that's the
something
start of.
I'll look out for you. Look
Yeah,
out
but
for.
maybe yeah, that's something to very. That in terms of characters. We talk about Vader being either subservient to the Emperor or not, and we can debate that. I think the Luke one is a lot more interesting to look at in terms of like,
Mm,
is he still kind of like a hothead kind of kid, or is he starting to really be like, I'm serious now? Like he's
yeah.
starting to like distance himself from everybody, kind of a way, getting a little Jedi weirdy, um, in that sense. And that'll be something to just look at for Ray too, in terms of like what her personality is as well. Because obviously she's not the young girl anymore, the scavenger girl. She is Jedi Master Ray. But I do wonder if she kind of decides, I'm going to keep more of my attached personality and kind of like friendly
Mhm.
nature instead of being just kind of like cold. I'm a Jedi. I'm
Yeah.
very monotone voice.
Kind of like I was saying about Ahsoka, right?
Yeah, kind of like with Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Although with Ahsoka, it's because of a lot of trauma, and I do wonder if Rey is monotone. Is she's like, is she pretending, or is she also going through trauma, or is she just trying to put up a front?
Yeah.
Um, so
I again, I don't. I hope not.
I hope not
I,
either.
yeah, because part of her appeal is holding on to the playfulness, and is innocence the right word? But yeah, I get what you're saying.
And plus, we've seen enough of the Jedi Master needs to kind of come out of their funk stories. I've seen it twice now.
True.
Both are great, but it's like, can we just have a Jedi Master who's like got it together?
Like Qui Gon.
Then they can
Give us
they
more
can
of a Qui Gon.
yeah, get more of a Qui Gon. Like they can help the kids.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to have problems. I mean, in terms of like Ray dealing with the Palpatine thing, I mean, I wonder if
Mhm.
like with Leia and Bloodline, it's like the press found out and it's like, we're taking on the name Skywalker. It's like, yeah, Anakin Skywalker. We know what happened to him, and he killed a bunch of people. So you're taking the name of you got the names of two people who killed a bunch of us. Why do we
Although
want your crazy wizardry around anymore? It
at that
always cut.
point, it's the name of Luke Skywalker, really.
I
You know,
wonder though. I wonder if Luke ever had to deal with that. Now though, I
that's
wonder if
interesting. Yeah.
like does the Anakin thing
Mhm.
tilt out the Luke thing, and it's like, you know, um, I remember you talked about the scene in this Boba Fett where like, you're like your father, and like I've heard people joke like people who know Anakin Skywalker knew what happened are gonna be like, it's basically like, yeah, I don't think that's a good thing. He's like his dad. I don't want him to be like his dad. Um,
Yeah.
if Reva ever met Luke and like Luke Skywalker, she'll go, A, sorry I tried to kill you as a kid, and B, yeah, I don't trust you with restarting the Jedi Order because of what happened last time with your dad.
Yeah,
I
that's a good point.
You
And
tried to kill
then
me.
there's the prequelist thing of its main story. It's has relevance.
Well, that too, and Ray's got the extra bad baggage of you're
Mm,
also got your genetic template is of the most evil person in our history,
yeah.
who's responsible for the deaths of trillions, twice.
Mhm.
Um, so there's Ray might. I mean, you could deal with that. I don't know. I'll be curious, but yeah, um, it'll be. Here's something. I do think it would be interesting if there see some antagonists not accept her as a Skywalker. That'd be cool. That'd be kind of like meta. Some of the
Yeah,
real
that's
people.
true.
Some of the real people
But
who
also
don't.
to say no, you're a Palpatine or you're nobody.
I think it'd
Yeah,
be almost insulting, more insulting if they say no, you're a Palpatine because it's like that's what they do,
yeah.
and those people we know who you are. And B, I think in terms of Rey, like, what does my name really matter to you at this point? My actions should be what matter, not you don't see me declaring myself Galactic Empress. And
Which is the point of the Last Jedi. Is you can be right from nobody, right from nowhere, and just still be a hero.
well, that'd be funny if those were the antagonists, because sort of like
Yeah.
the people who didn't get the message.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of meta interesting, and I'd be down for that.
Especially with all the uproar about Obey Chennai's quotes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure the script's already been written way in
Yeah.
advance before all of that,
That's true.
hopefully. But yeah, that would be interesting.
Mhm.
Dealing with that. I also agree. Like, yeah, I do think finding that balance between the character time progression, which is important. Ray can't Ray can't be just the person we know already. Um,
Mhm.
Although I'll just say, in kind of the defense of the not crazy Last Jedi haters, I do think that there can't be whiplash between seeing Luke at Return of the Jedi, seeing Last Jedi, and kind of not that in between. Kind of like, how did we get here? Because that is a quote I've heard where it's like, it doesn't bother everybody, but I could see where it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, how did Luke get to here now? Like, one minute you're the new pope, gonna start the Jedi Order, the Jedi's back, and now you're just on an island going, it's time for the Jedi to end. Like that can
Yeah.
have some whiplash, especially if you're not kind of seeing a more natural transition from um A to B, or A to C in this
Right.
case.
I mean, and that's the thing that it has to
It's
show the
so
Rashomon
radical.
sequence. Yeah.
It's very radical. Uh,
I guess I mean that depends on an image of who Luke is in their minds, which isn't inaccurate.
mhm.
It's just not the full story, right? If the image of Luke is ignite the green, yeah, if your image of Luke is, I mean, I could see like the serene, put together, yeah, the gleaming hope for the galaxy, and then the next thing you see. The question then is, oh, that's weird. What happened? What must have happened? Right? It's uncomfortable. Why do I find that uncomfortable? What was I hoping? I mean, those are the two things that Last Jedi confronts us with. So,
I mean, that's just an issue I have with the sequels in general. Is I feel like
hmm,
they don't really transition you to the new era. It's like, if you're watching just the movies, it's like Return of the Jedi. We did it. We beat the Empire, and now the Empire's like fully back, and it's like even
yeah,
shinier now. It's like, what the heck happened?
yeah.
Snobby
I want to
senator.
see like an Olmec type character.
That'd be
Boba
great.
Fett's just a common. Jango Fett was just a common bounty hunter. That kind of
That
thing.
that'd be great.
That
But
kind of thing. Yeah.
that'd be great too.
Yeah.
But we're kind of running late. But that is something actually.
Yeah.
Maybe one more thing we could talk about is, and we did talk about with the comics, are those bridges. And
Hmm.
I think the without even the Bad Batch and the Andors and the Rogue Ones, for me the prequels bridge into the original trilogy quite nicely. Quite
Sure.
quite nicely. By the end we get Darth Vader, get the sense of the Empire. It's not a good time. The bridge between that Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, it's like, whoa, what happens? It's like
Yeah.
almost whiplash, and
It's
people are
under
like,
construction.
it's under construction. In
Yeah.
that maybe for this is more Force Awakens problem than it is of the other two, where it's sort of
Yeah.
like maybe we should have started in a more what you would consider a post Return of the Jedi status quo, better. See the New Republic happy, Luke, Han, and Leia maybe happy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard, and then kind of we see the break of those three at the end, and then obviously Ray and the gang have to save the day. Bless you, bless you. My ideas are
I'm
causing
alive.
allergies.
Yeah. Yeah. Your cat all the way in California.
I know it's,
Yeah.
but that is something I think I've heard people talk about, and I kind of see it. Where it's like that is
Yeah.
kind of that whiplash of like you watch Return of the Jedi, everything's hunky dory, and then it's like, whoa, what happened? It's like it feels like we're just back to status quo, but we're back.
Yeah, I kind of felt that too, and that's where the typical criticism, which I think is fair, that Force Awakens needed more political backstory, more
I think we need
exposition.
more backstory. Period. Just let's see Luke, Han, and
Yeah,
Leia. What's going on with them?
yeah. Like why are Han and Leia divorced all of a sudden? They were so in love, and that also that kind of to give us a little more call it backstory. What happened? Um, and that's the thing is that you can confront it and can experience it in the story, and that's again something Ryan Johnson does that JJ Abrams doesn't do as well. So yeah.
Right, but I mean that is sort of the interesting thing is I wonder seeing Luke Skywalker, like having the not just the flashback, but having the whole movie be the Luke break. Let's break Luke Skywalker the movie. I mean, I'm sure probably wouldn't. But
Mhm,
for maybe more the people who are a little bit more critical, but not completely against the concept,
mhm.
be able to kind of transition. Okay, here's Luke. He's confident. He just beat the Emperor. He's gonna start a Jedi Order. Let's watch him break, and then Ray can then go fix him up. Kind of like with Obi-Wan in a little bit, where it's like we kind of do see Obi-Wan
Yeah.
break a little bit. I think he's more broken by the time you get to Kenobi, and then ultimately get his groove back.
Well,
Um,
we see him break on the high ground at Mustafar,
right,
right? I mean, that's what happens. We just then he spends his 10 years overthinking, thinking, and overthinking,
right.
and that's another way of showing passage of time through character contrast, right?
Hmm.
You know, he's still in the middle of it in the high ground in Mustafar.
Hmm.
Then he's defeated over time,
Hmm.
and that Kenobi film, the Kenobi series, is the story of his transition from letting go of that despair that has accrued over time,
Hmm.
despair of Anakin, to hoping in Luke and Leia. That transition moment, which of course the comics do also,
Of course,
that
of course.
brilliant comic. So, yeah, yeah, it's true, but yeah, I mean, do we? Well, I mean, are we going to see a little bit? We saw a bit of it in the Mandoverse. We saw the before story.
It's so before though. I don't
Yeah, we
expect
saw the
this.
before story. But the thing is, we have already seen, and that's the thing is people sitting in the theater, just wait an hour and a half, and you'll actually see it.
I mean, maybe
you
just
know?
maybe. I mean, for some people, it might not have been enough. And
Yeah, maybe.
this is one thing I like. I kind of liked how Legends post Endor went by,
Mhm.
where it was more a natural progression. And ultimately, I know why they did the big time jump because they needed
Yeah,
Mark, Carrie, and Harrison because they're getting older and not gonna be playing young.
it's
You should
also Ray Finn and Poe's story. You know?
Well, that too, but ultimately, you gotta get they're not gonna deep fake. They weren't gonna deep fake back then.
No.
Mark Harrison and Carrie Young just having a full on movie. They weren't gonna, yeah. So, but it's like, but in Legends, it's like, the Thrawn trilogy, kind of the first big one, 5 years, good time, and then kind
Mhm.
of each book is like maybe a year passes in between each little trilogy, and then we see Jason Solo grow up from baby to 24, and then he dies evil. But it's sort of like, okay, natural progression. We kind of could
It's
see him.
main story. It's not backstory. Is what you're getting at.
Right. And, with Luke and, all the original trilogy characters, I mean, I love what happens. I think
Mhm.
it's cathartic and great, but it's sort of like, I can't see, like, yeah, whiplash. 1 minute, Han and Leia are happy, and then they're divorced. Luke's on an island depressed. What the heck happened?
Right.
And it's sort of,
It's a shock. I get that,
and maybe
and
some,
that like it isn't. We aren't led through it, and it's maybe people felt that the moment wasn't earned.
that
Like
too.
maybe that's what we're getting at here. Um, yeah, to understand people, I disagree with, but
I
uh,
mean, yeah, I mean, this is what the. I mean, now we're going to get that kind of more of that bridge, somewhat
yeah,
filling out the gaps, in a sense, even though we're not really focusing on Luke, Han, and Leia. We're still
right.
mostly focusing on the context of the galaxy. I hope we
Mhm,
do. I want to get that Luke Jedi Academy show because I think that
yeah,
would be awesome. Kind of see Ben Solo. I mean, that's another character. Well, no, because we don't really not a whiplash with Ben Solo, but um, yeah, but I do like it when we do see those bridges. And I think maybe also just to kind of wrap it up and go back to comics again as the
mhm.
final thing. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Um,
Very
but
good.
the reason I love Gillen and Soul's run
Mhm,
more than I like Greg Pak's is I feel like there was a stronger bridge to get from Vader in A New Hope, this is Gillen,
yeah,
who is kind of the subservient, just kind of the Emperor's enforcer, to the ambitious, okay, Luke, we should rule the
right,
galaxy as
right.
father, as son, like then, and obviously Charles Soule's first run, where it's like, no, like what's going on? I'm a robot, and then it's like, okay, this is my life now.
Yeah,
I gotta do it.
yeah,
And I just feel like the bridge from Vader being we shall rule the galaxy as father, son to you don't know the power of the dark side. I
yeah. But
must obey my master.
yeah,
I'm not. It's a little bit more like feel like there's a little too many extra steps going
that's
on.
exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? Is this whole thing? I guess the with that whole, where are these characters headed to? Where is this going? Why are we? Is it taking us 4 years to get there?
Yeah.
All that. Except that, I think we have get with the Vader comic, we've been given some things along the way with Sabe. Hopefully again with the Schism Imperial.
Mhm.
But also to say, that's kind of maybe how I felt. Now that you brought up, this is to kind of recap what we were saying. You brought up the Clone Wars example.
Mhm.
Now that we don't feel that way about the Clone Wars,
Mhm.
maybe once this is all said and done, these comics are all said and done,
Mhm.
we won't feel that way about these comics either.
I hope
And
so.
and again, give us a good story in the moment.
Mhm.
Charles, give me a good story on Wednesday. I'll be like, yeah, great. Luke and this weird Sith lady and the Kyber crystal, sure, why not? The first issue of the Schism Imperial was great. Here for it. I finished the comics like, okay, all right, why not?
Excuse me.
But also speculating, okay, this could lead to either Vader having this sort of sense of I'm going to take him down now, or it leads to I'm going to take him down and I've got slapped back, and now I have to say you don't know the power of the Emperor. I must
Right.
obey my master. All that.
Or even with Luke, it's like, he's
Mhm.
still kind of a bit more of a chirpy kind of, kid
Yeah,
in Empire than, but, kind of see the detached, like,
yeah.
I'm Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. I'm very monotone as well.
I mean, maybe going through all the Dark Droid stuff might have affected both of them. We'll see. There's still more comics coming out, so we'll see. There we go.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
think we've covered everything we could cover about
Mhm.
time in Star Wars. Sorry, this was a very
That's
when did Luke meet Anakin's
Just want to
ghost?
answer that question. In Shadows of the Sith, there's this really fascinating moment, and it doesn't really give us too much, but it's just Anakin, Vader, kind of. It's sort of similar to what we see in Ahsoka, but it feels like Anakin is controlling it less. So we don't really know, but yeah, he does confront his ghost. Yeah,
Right. Well, doesn't he
right.
meet his? When did he meet his ghost earlier? Like, well, hey, he meets him in Return of the Jedi because he's looking at him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But even then, it's like,
But
when did he meet his ghost earlier,
he's
dude?
Force
Like,
Ghost. Yeah, but I
mm,
guess that's where my mind went was after everything's happened. Sure.
I'm sure. I hope he met him more than once. But
That's a good question. It feels like that's the first time after we see him in Return of the Jedi.
that'll be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's. I think that's gonna do it for this week. This was a very esoteric topic. I wrote notes, but I'm sort of like, you know what? This is something we just gotta talk about. This
Yeah.
is just something we need to just hash through together.
One of those classic Ion Cannon deep dives where we didn't know where we're going and we found it. Found the way through. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Yeah, we went, just over 2 hours. So a bit of a shorter episode. Love it. Yeah. So let us know what you think. What you think? How do you experience time and the passage of time in Star Wars within a story, outside of stories, between stories? Um, does the comic release schedule affect things? Does how long you take to read a book affect things? Does going to bed too affect things? I don't know. What do you remember from you're watching Clone Wars and Rebels? Let us know in the comments below on all these socials. Those comment boxes ain't going anywhere. They'll still be there. But also, of course, let us know on social medias. Speaking of which, Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
Yes, you can find me at JID2021. Again, JID2021 on Twitter. You can also find me on the Discord, especially the Star Wars Underworld Discord. And sometimes I tweet stuff at the Ion Cannon Pod. Again, at the Ion Cannon
Or
Pod.
just at Iron Cannon Pod. Just put it
At
out
Ion. Yeah. So, of course, check us out there as always. Say
Yes,
hello.
there we go. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram and Threads at MNEUG1138, on Twitter, NEUG485, and yeah, at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Check out Tractoring Wednesday. We're talking about Outgoing number 42. That's just it.
Woo!
We're not talking about The Mandalorian. We're not doing that one because that one's not. Yeah, anyway, I've been over that. So yeah, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Grab your dinner, grab your comics, grab your nightcap, etc. And then so at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD, and of course at the SWU for the flagship. Check them out Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and of course the Discord link down below. When's the next movie watch along? It's not this Friday, it's next Friday.
Not this, yeah, it's next Friday. So yeah, more
So
Young Jedi Adventures. Yay!
it's every 2 weeks, is what it is.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
we might switch it out for game nights and stuff. So
Yeah.
we're gonna spread it as much as we can.
It'll take, speaking of the passage of time. There we go.
Yeah.
So check us out. Tag us in the Discord. If you got any questions, comments, thoughts, feels, let us know there as well. We'll be happy to respond either way. So link is minty fresh link down below. Next week we do have a topic in mind, and we've mentioned I think probably something about rebellions and governments and all that. Just gonna sort of guests to see who's available when. So we might do that topic. We might do a different topic. We'll definitely let you know. On that next episode of the Iron Cannon podcast next Monday at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Joel, it's been fun. It's been a time and half time. Till then, let's blow this thing and head home.